It's the early 1970s. A family comes into therapy. The parents say the problem is their teenage son. He won't listen. He's defiant. He's out of control. Jay Haley looks at the son. Then he looks at the parents. Then he says something that changes the whole conversation. He doesn't ask the son why he's acting out. He asks the parents why they need him to. That question, that subtle, almost provocative reframe, is the heart of strategic family therapy. And it was genuinely radical because it said something most therapists at the time weren't willing to say out loud. The symptom isn't the problem. The symptom is the solution. It's doing something. It's holding something together that would otherwise fall apart. Haley had trained with Gregory Bateson, worked alongside Milton Erickson, and studied communication theory. He came to the theory with one core belief, that people get stuck not because they lack insight, but because the systems around them keep them stuck. And the therapist's job isn't to help people understand that. The therapist's job is to disrupt it. Virginia Satir arrived at the same party from a completely different direction. She wasn't interested in disruption. She was interested in something much older and much simpler. She wanted people to feel seen. Satir believed that most human suffering came down to one thing: low self-worth. And low self-worth showed up in how people communicated, not what they said, how they said it. The body, the picture, the way someone shrinks when they speak or puffs up to avoid being vulnerable. Two completely different visions of what therapy should do. Both change the field. Both will be on your exam. Let's get into it. Welcome back to the Licensure Lifeline, the podcast that helps you build the knowledge and confidence to pass the exam and show up well in the room. I'm your host, Matt Lawson, and we're continuing with Family Systems series today. Last week we got into Bowen and Minuchin, their differentiation, triangulation, enmeshment, boundaries, just the whole framework. If you missed it, go back. It was a really good one. I really enjoyed that. This week we're going to kind of another side of this, strategic family therapy. So Haley and Madanes, the approach that uses directive, paradox, and deliberate disruption within the therapy framework. We're also going to look at experiential family therapy from Virginia Satir. That approach puts emotion, communication, and self-worth at the center of everything. Also want to make note, if you haven't already, sign up for the Licensure Lifeline newsletter. Links in the notes. You can also go to licensurelifeline.com and find the link to get the newsletter as well. The whole point of the newsletter is to go deeper into these topics that we talk about. I'm going to give you a lot of information today through the podcast, and then you're able to go to the newsletter and continue that studying and go to more depth on the topics. That's how it kind of underlines this. Also, check out the Licensure Lifeline Circle community. It is up and going. Go take a look. Again, link in the show notes, as well as you can find it through the Licensure Lifeline. I'm running a kind of a special right now where you can try it out for 2 weeks for free, and then decide if it's something that you want to go with. The whole point of this community is to bring people together that are studying for this test, give them a place to communicate and talk about their experiences. But it also has things like quizzes. I have different information just around licensure. I'm putting up videos. It has little cheat sheets in there, and I'm really developing it. I want this to be a really nice community for individuals that just provide support in getting the test done and then also launching their careers as therapists. Also, the Licensure Lifeline is now on YouTube. You can now get the podcast through YouTube as well. I'm also going to be starting what I'm calling the 7th Wave series on there as well. This is going to specifically be content for that channel around technology and mental health, emerging tech, and the way that it's impacting mental health and how we can support individuals in this area through our practices. All right, enough with the announcements. Let's go into the news. First up, a major new study published this week found that mental health disorders are now the leading cause of disability worldwide. Nearly 1.2 billion people were living with mental health disorders in 2023, almost twice as many as was recorded in 1990. So just take a second just to think about how significant that is. In that time, the growth of people struggling with mental health issues. And, just the way the world has gone over the last couple of decades, unfortunately, not a huge surprise. But the research points to a combination of factors. Better diagnosis, which we see a lot of times when we see upticks in any illness, really. Less stigma. More people are actually coming to therapy. Genuine increase in prevalence in a world that has become measurably harder to navigate. But whatever the cause, the need is real, and the need for us is real. So if there's ever any question that you might have around, am I going in the right direction? Especially if I'm looking to support people, you are going in the right direction. Next up in the news, the Trump administration released sweeping executive orders in June, making it easier to involuntarily commit people who are unhoused and having serious mental health conditions. Mental health advocates and crisis care experts have pushed back on this, noting that involuntary commitment can create what they call a revolving door that drains health systems and often harms the individuals going through it. This is something that we really need to consider and look at. On the one hand, you want people to get help, you want people to get support, but on the other hand, this does the fact that it's making it easier for people to be committed. It's going to strain the system, and we need some better guardrails in place. The debate about involuntary commitment is fundamentally a systems question. Who decides when someone's autonomy yields to safety? What happens to trust when the mental health system becomes coercive? How do clinicians maintain therapeutic alliances with clients who they know might be committed? And it does. Like, this is the weight that it puts on clinicians. Is it puts them in a place where people don't necessarily want to be there, but for whatever factor this has been deemed necessary. And, just being able to provide them the support they need becomes a whole other topic. So something to consider, something to keep on your radar. Speaking of systems, something about strategic and experiential therapy that nobody mentions in grad school. Both approaches are highly relational. Haley would give a family homework and directive around when to spend the next session unpacking what happened with that homework. Satir would have a family do sculpting exercises that took the whole session. All that is clinical work. None of it runs itself. You still have notes to write, sessions to schedule, and insurance to bill. Simple Practice handles all of it. Practice management built specifically for mental health clinicians, scheduling, billing, notes, telehealth, and insurance. So you can stay in the clinical work without drowning in administrative side. You will see how significant it is when you get bogged down on the administrative side. And that is one of the really nice things with Simple Practice is it just makes that part of your work that much easier and allows you to focus on being that clinician that shows up for the people that need you. There is a free trial of Simple Practice available. I will have a link for you in the show notes where you can give it a try, just give it a look. I do highly recommend that. I've used them in my private practice. It really is a great system. Here's the thing about strategic therapy that makes it different from everything else we've covered in this series. Every other approach we've discussed wants the family to understand something. Bowen wants them to see the multi-generational patterns. Minuchin wants them to feel structure shift. Even CBT wants the client to develop insight into their own thinking. Strategic therapy doesn't care if you necessarily understand anything. It cares if you change. Jay Haley was blunt about this. Insight doesn't produce change. Change produces change. And the therapist's job is to design conditions for change to happen, whether the family understands this or not. That's the spirit of strategic therapy. Directive, problem-focused, and deliberately designed. This can be an extremely refreshing approach. There is this idea that I've kind of deemed kind of therapeutic drift that I see a lot of times in my own work that I talk to colleagues about. And it's this place where things stop being as directive as they could be. There's always room for processing. There's always room for creating space for individuals. There's always room for being that witness for that individual that needs to come in and talk. But also, a lot of the times people are coming in with an actual desire to present a problem that they are having, a problem in their families that they want to come to a resolution around. And this takes a little bit more of a directive approach. You need to have a little bit more of a point to the therapy that you're doing with these individuals. And these frameworks, this strategic family therapy, gives you that framework. The core tool in strategic therapy is the directive, a specific instruction the therapist gives the family to carry out between sessions, not a suggestion, not homework in the general sense, a precise, deliberate prescription for behavior. Directives come in two flavors, and both will be on your exam. The first is the straightforward directive. Do this. A couple who avoids conflict is instructed to have one strategic argument per week. 10 minutes, specific topic, timer goes off, and it ends. The directive creates a context that for the avoided behaviors to happen safely. I've done this with couples before. It's great. Schedule a time to argue. It's different when you have to make yourselves argue. And especially given that it's on a timer, it changes the whole frame of the argument. And I put that in air quotes. The second is the paradoxical directive. And this is where Haley gets genuinely interesting. A paradoxical directive prescribes the symptom. You tell the family to keep doing the thing they came in to stop doing. A child who throws tantrums is told to have a tantrum every Tuesday at 4 p.m. A couple who fights constantly is instructed to schedule their fights. Why would you do that? Because the symptom is spontaneous. It happens outside of any control. The moment you put it in a schedule, you take it out of that spontaneous context. So very similar to the directive piece that I talked to. Making people do things that tend to happen spontaneously on a schedule, again, makes them frame it in a different way in their heads. Families can't have an uncontrolled tantrum on Tuesday at 4 p.m. if they were supposed to be having a controlled one. The symptom loses its power, and the family gets the evidence that they actually have more control than they thought. Because that's what happens a lot of times with these issues that people bring to us, is they feel out of control. They feel like this is something that, is a force of nature that they just have to deal with. They don't have a sense of control. And what this aims to do is to give them a better sense of control. Cloe Madanes, Haley's collaborator and equal, brought something important to the strategic model. She focused on the function of the symptoms in the power dynamic of the family. Specifically, she noticed that the symptoms often serve to protect a function. A child's anxiety protects the parents from having to confront their marital issues. A teenager's defiance distracts from a father's depression. For Madanes, the question was always, who is the symptom protecting and from what? So the reframe here becomes from the symptoms as a problem to the symptoms as the symptoms as a protection is both clinically useful and directly testable. And again, like, you are going to be blown away by how often people will come in and say, like, this is the problem. My child's the problem, or my relationship's the problem. And what you come to discover is the focus of that problem is allowing the individual to take away from the actual problem that they're dealing with, the deep-seated depression, the deep-seated anxiety that they're struggling with. Not to say that those problems aren't happening, that the relationship is, maybe not going so great, or the kid is acting out, but the person isn't dealing with something that they're struggling with that's actually contributing to the problem a lot of the times, and avoiding it in order to deal with something else. So, one exam note before we move on: strategic therapy questions often present a scenario where the therapist gives an unusual or counterintuitive instruction. The wrong answer is usually the one that says the therapist is being unethical or inappropriate. The right answer recognizes the paradoxical directive as the delivered strategic intervention. Get that? So on the test, you might see something that makes it sound like the paradoxical directive is inappropriate. It's not. It sounds like something that it could be. And the test is testing to know if you can see this as a really strategic tool that you can use. Okay, let's go into Virginia Satir. She is a bit different from everyone else who we've covered in the series in general. She actually liked people. Not that the other ones didn't, but she really, that was her big focus. And that sounds kind of like a bit of a joke, right? It isn't. She brought warmth and genuine belief into human potential to her work that was unusual in a field that sometimes prioritized technique over humanity. She came into therapy during a time when it was, people being very clinical about their approaches and, looking at the systems that they can produce and the therapeutic interventions that they can utilize to help people. But, she brought a little bit more of a human, a warmer sense of how we take care of individuals. At the center of her model was one idea: most human problems come down to low self-esteem and low worth. And low self-worth shows up most clearly in how people communicate. Satir identified 4 dysfunctional communication patterns. She called them stances. These people would adopt these stances under stress and when their self-worth is threatened. The placator is the first one: agrees with everyone, apologizes constantly, takes the blame, does anything to avoid conflict. Underneath the placating is a belief: my needs don't matter. The second one is the blamer. The blamer criticizes, accuses, points fingers, takes up all the space in the room. Underneath the blaming is a belief: I have to be in control or I'm nothing. The next one is the computer, also called the super reasonable. This is, detached, intellectual, emotionally flat, uses big words, explains everything, feels nothing. At least they show nothing. That's how they present. Underneath is a belief of that I must not show any vulnerability. And then finally, you have the distractor, also called the irrelevant. And this individual will shift topics, makes jokes, can't stay focused, changes the subject whenever anything gets real. Underneath is the belief: there's no place for me here. And there's a 5th stance, the one Satir called congruent communication: saying what you mean, feeling what you feel, being present without defending, attacking, retreating, or distracting. That's the goal of Satir's therapy. She wants to get people around to this stance. She doesn't want insight, not structural recognition. She wants congruence. Family sculpting was Satir's signature technique, and it's worth knowing for the exam. I feel like I remember a question around family sculpting from the test. And this involves physically positioning family members in space to represent the emotional relationship in the family. And while I don't quite remember this on the test, I absolutely remember this from grad school. We actually had to do this, like play a mock family in class. And we did this positioning, this physical sculpting of a family system. So someone volunteers to be the sculptor, usually a family member, and arranges everyone in the room the way they experience the family. This is fascinating. Close, far, turned away, reaching, hunched, elevated. What it does is it takes something invisible, the emotional structure of the family, and makes it visible. You can see the enmeshment. You can see the cutoff. You can feel the distance between two people who are technically in the same room, but might as well be in different buildings. For the exam, family sculpting is Satir. It's experiential and uses the body and physical space rather than language. And the purpose is to externalize the family emotional experience so it can be worked with directly. This can be I highly recommend you watch videos of this. It is really fascinating to see these different interpretations, how people see their family members. And then watching people realize like, oh my gosh, that's how people see me. Watching, parents and kids, like see how the other members of their family see them. It's really, really interesting. Love this topic. So let's look at two frameworks before we get into some of the questions here. For strategic therapy questions, look for the directives. If the therapist is giving specific instructions for behavior between sessions, that's strategic. If those instructions seem counterintuitive or prescribe the very behavior the family wants to stop, that's paradoxical. The function is always to disrupt the system, homeostasis, the system's homeostasis, and create conditions for change. For experiential therapy, questions look for the body, emotion, and communication. If the question involves physical positioning, sculpting, or communication stances, that's Satir. If the question asks about self-worth, congruence, and communication patterns under stress, that's also Satir. The exam trap in this content area is assuming that a directive is inappropriate or unethical because it seems strange, right? Paradoxical directives are designed to seem strange. That's the intervention. Recognizing the intention behind an unusual instruction is what the question is testing. Okay, that's going to be it for the main body. Let's get into some questions. Question number 1. A family therapist working from a strategic framework is treating a couple who argues constantly and cannot seem to stop. The therapist instructs them to schedule a 15-minute argument every evening at 7 p.m. to argue about whatever they want, then stop when the timer goes off. This intervention is best identified as A, an enactment, asking the couple to demonstrate their conflict in a session, B, a paradoxical directive, prescribing the symptoms to disrupt its spontaneous function, C, a structural intervention, reorganizing the couple's interaction hierarchy, or B, a Bowenian directive, helping the couple de-triangulate from the outside parties. The answer to this is going to be B, paradoxical directive. Prescribing the symptoms removes it from the spontaneity, out of control context. The argument can't function as an uncontrollable outburst if it's scheduled. The couple gains evidence of control they didn't know they had. Okay. Question number 2. According to Cloe Madanes' strategic model, a 10-year-old child who develops severe separation anxiety whenever the parents discuss divorce is best understood as A, demonstrating enmeshment with primary caregiver, B, exhibiting a symptom that serves a protective function in the family system, C, showing evidence of low differentiation of self, or D, developing an anxious attachment style based on an early caregiving experience. The answer here is going to be B, a symptom that serves to protect function. Madanes extended Haley's model by focusing on protective function of symptoms. Who is the symptom protecting and from what? The child's anxiety reliably interrupts the divorce conversation. It protects the parents or the marriage from the confrontation that might otherwise happen. The symptom is not random, it's a function. Question number 3. A family therapist observes that one parent speaks in long, emotionally flat monologues, avoids eye contact, and uses clinical language to describe the family problems, never expressing any personal feelings. According to Virginia Satir's model, this communication pattern is best identified as A, placating, B, blaming, C, computing, or D, distracting. Answer here is going to be C, computing or super reasonable stance. The computer stance is characterized by emotional detachment, intellectualizing and avoidance, and any avoidance of any personal vulnerability. Long clinical affect-free descriptions of problems with no personal feeling visible anywhere. This is classical. This is the classical presentation of this. Question number 4. A family therapist asks a family member to physically position each person in the room to represent how some experience the emotional relationship in the family. Placing people close or far, turned toward or away, elevated or lower, this technique is best identified as A, enactment, B, joining, C, family sculpting, or D, unbalancing. This is easy. C, family sculpting. This is from Virginia Satir. It's one of her signature experiential techniques, using physical space and body positioning to externalize the family's emotional structure. It makes the invisible visible, the emotional distance, the cutoff, the enmeshment. All of it becomes something the family can literally see and feel in the room. Okay, that is going to do it for this episode. Know your strategic therapy framework. Haley and Madanes use directives between sessions. Paradoxical directives that prescribes the symptoms as solutions to something, and Madanes' key contribution, symptoms as protection. Who is this symptom protecting and from what? Next, know your satir. 4 communication stances: placator, blamer, computer, distractor. Each one a defense against low self-worth. Family sculpting as the signature technique, physically positioning body and space, making the invisible visible, congruent communication as the goal. Number 3, on the exam, watch the signals. Directives between sessions equals strategic. Physical positioning equals satir. Counterintuitive instruction equals paradoxical directive, not unethical intention. The newsletter this week goes a bit deeper into this. That's kind of how I'm trying to frame all of this. Is I give some of the most salient points in the podcast, and then I go deeper, kind of give you guys a deeper cut in the newsletter. So please take a look. It's a really nice companion to this podcast. I think it rounds out your week. Next week, we're moving into something completely different. We're going to be looking at some of the marriage and family therapy exam focus stuff. So this makes systemic questions different from individual therapy questions and exactly how you approach them. If you're sitting for an MFT exam, you don't want to miss this one. But just getting this knowledge, and actually looking if this is an area that you're interested in. I have worked with couples off and on over the years. It is a different kind of therapy. And, if this is an area that speaks to you, highly recommended. There's always a need for couples counselor. It is extremely difficult to find a couples counselor in most areas. I've been a therapist between two pretty major cities at this point, and I know that people struggle to find couples counseling in both Denver and Chicago. So keep that in mind. But until next week, never stop learning. Take care, everyone.